This is the residual relay. Long-range signal network. Frequency-locked broadcast. Authorized under Continuity Office Operational Mandate CO-Relay-1987. Renewed annually. You are receiving this transmission because your equipment remains tuned to an active relay channel. No action is required on your part, unless otherwise directed. Tonight's broadcast originates from Relay Station Caro 6, the Eastern Regional Hub, which is currently operating under Standard Overnight Monitoring Protocol. All primary systems are active. Signal integrity is nominal. Backup power is available, but not engaged. My name is Operator Marin Elish. I hold current certification under Continuity Office Field Communications, Level 3, with secondary authorization for archive retrieval and regional coordination. I have been assigned to Caro 6 for 11 years. I am familiar with this station, its equipment, and its operational history. Before I begin tonight's broadcast, I want to note for the record, and for anyone reviewing this transmission after the fact, that what I am about to report was not initially categorized as an event. It was categorized as equipment behavior. That distinction held for approximately 9 hours. I will proceed chronologically. At 2:22 p.m. yesterday, Relay Station Dunmore 3, a mid-range signal repeater located approximately 190 kilometers west-northwest of this station, flagged an anomalous reading on its passive atmospheric monitoring array. The array is not a primary system. It exists to detect environmental interference that might affect signal quality, electrical storms, ionospheric disturbance, heavy precipitation bands, thermal inversion layers. The anomalous reading was classified as ambient signal contamination. Specifically, the array detected a repeating pattern embedded in background atmospheric wind noise, to be precise, that matched the timing structure of a Continuity Office emergency encoding format. I will explain what that means. The Continuity Office uses a standardized system of coded transmissions for priority communications. These codes follow a specific temporal pattern, grouped bursts of fixed duration, separated by fixed duration silence intervals, arranged in sequences corresponding to predefined operational messages. The system has been in use since 1962. It is not classified. It is not secret. But it is specific. The timing intervals are precise to the 10th of a second, and they do not occur naturally. What the Dunmore 3 array detected was a wind pattern acoustic atmospheric turbulence, whose amplitude fluctuations matched the timing structure of a Priority 3 emergency code. Priority 3 corresponds to Regional Monitoring Stations Stand By for Coordination Directive. The Dunmore 3 operator Fesser logged the reading as an equipment artifact. Atmospheric arrays occasionally produce false positives when wind speeds are high, and microphone elements vibrate at resonant frequencies. This is documented. It happens perhaps twice a year at exposed stations. Operator Fesser reset the array, confirmed no actual Priority 3 directive had been issued by any Continuity Office coordination desk, and filed a standard equipment anomaly report. The report was received at Caro 6 at 1441. I reviewed it. I concurred with the assessment. I filed it. At 15:08, Relay Station Wendover 7, located 240 kilometers northwest, flagged an identical reading. Same pattern, same timing structure, same code. Priority 3. Regional Monitoring Station Stand By for Coordination Directive. Wendover 7's operator Chasen independently reached the same conclusion. Equipment artifact. He noted, additionally, that wind speeds at his station were moderate, not high. He described conditions as steady westerly, 12 to 15 kilometers per hour, no gusting. He reset his array and filed. At 15:33, Relay Station Halverston 2 reported the same reading. At 1541, relay station Morrow Peak reported the same reading. At 1558, this station, Caro 6, detected it. I was at the monitoring desk when the alert triggered. I listened to the raw audio feed from our atmospheric array. What I heard was wind, unambiguously wind. The sound of air moving across an exposed landscape and over equipment housing. Nothing unusual in character, but the amplitude, the rise and fall of intensity was patterned. I isolated the waveform. I ran it against the Continuity Office encoding reference table. It matched priority 3 exactly. Burst duration, 1.4 seconds. Silence interval, 0.6 seconds. Group count, 3. Intergroup pause, 2.1 seconds. Sequence repeat, continuous. I checked with the Regional Coordination Desk. No priority 3 directive had been issued. No directive of any priority had been issued. The Coordination Desk confirmed all systems nominal, all sectors reporting normally. I filed my report and appended it to the 4 previous reports. At 1612, I received confirmation that 7 additional stations across the western and central sectors had filed identical readings within the same 90-minute window. 12 stations. All detecting the same encoded pattern, all in wind noise, all in the absence of any issued directive. The Coordination Desk upgraded the anomaly classification from equipment behavior to environmental signal contamination. A review was initiated. The review was assigned to Signal Analysis, a division within the Continuity Office responsible for evaluating communication anomalies. Their preliminary assessment arrived at 19:30 last night, approximately 4 hours after the classification upgrade. I will read the relevant portions. Preliminary analysis of waveform data from 12 reporting stations confirms the presence of a repeating temporal pattern in atmospheric acoustic recordings. The pattern is consistent with Continuity Office Priority 3, Emergency Encoding, Format Revision 1.962-C, currently in active operational use. Cross-station timing analysis reveals the following. The pattern is not synchronous across stations. Onset times vary by station in a manner consistent with geographic propagation. Specifically, the pattern appears to have originated in or near the western coastal sector and propagated eastward at a rate consistent with prevailing surface wind speed, approximately 14 to 18 kilometers per hour. This propagation characteristic is significant. It indicates the pattern is not being generated independently at each station by local equipment resonance. It is embedded in a moving air mass and is being carried by the wind itself. Signal analysis does not currently possess an explanatory model for how atmospheric turbulence could encode a structured temporal pattern of this specificity. Recommendation: continued monitoring, expansion of passive array coverage, field verification at 1 or more station sites to confirm acoustic presence independent of electronic detection. End of preliminary assessment. I want to draw attention to the propagation finding. The wind was carrying it. The pattern was not appearing at random stations. It was moving with the air. It arrived at western stations first and eastern stations later. It moved at wind speed. It behaved in every measurable respect as though it were a property of the wind itself. At 2015, field verification was initiated at Wendover 7. Operator Chasen and a maintenance technician went outside the station and stood in the wind with a handheld acoustic recorder, a separate instrument from the station's electronic array. They recorded for 11 minutes. The pattern was present in the handheld recording. They described it as inaudible to the unaided ear. The wind sounded like wind, but when the recording was analyzed, the amplitude structure was there. Consistent. Repeating. Priority 3. Chasen noted in his supplementary report, and I will quote directly, "Standing in the wind, I could not hear anything unusual. It sounded like wind. I have stood in wind at this station for 6 years. It sounded like wind. But the recorder disagrees with me, and I do not know how to reconcile that. Field verification confirmed. The pattern is real, is present in the physical atmosphere, and is not an artifact of station equipment. At 2100, Signal Analysis issued an updated classification. The event was designated Atmospheric Encoded Signal Origin Unknown. File reference CO-A TM-2026-07-29/ENC. Monitoring was expanded to all sectors. At 2247 last night, Relay Station Prestwick 4, Far Western Sector, reported that the pattern in its atmospheric readings had changed. The timing structure no longer matched Priority 3. It now matched Priority 2. Priority 2 corresponds to all monitoring stations confirm operational readiness. Await tasking. The change was first detected at Prestwick 4 and subsequently confirmed at 6 other Western Sector stations within the following 40 minutes. The new pattern propagated eastward at the same rate as the original wind speed, approximately 15 kilometers per hour. I want to be precise about what this means. The wind did not stop carrying one code and begin carrying another. The transition was smooth. Over a period of approximately 12 minutes at each station, the timing intervals gradually shifted. Burst durations shortened from 1.4 seconds to 1.1 seconds. Silence intervals lengthened from 0.6 to 0.9 seconds. Group count increased from 3 to 4 until the waveform matched a different, higher priority emergency code. The wind changed what it was saying. I am aware of how that sentence sounds. I am reporting what was measured. At 23:15, Signal Analysis issued an advisory to all relay stations. I will read it in full. Advisory CO-ATM-2026-07-29/ENC Update 2. The atmospheric encoded signal has undergone a structural transition consistent with a change in message content. The new pattern matches Priority 2 emergency encoding. No Priority 2 directive has been issued by any Continuity Office Coordination Desk. All stations are reminded that the encoded patterns detected in atmospheric readings are not operational communications. They are not directives. They have not been issued by any Continuity Office authority. Stations should not interpret atmospheric readings as instructions. Monitoring continues. Next assessment scheduled for 200. I read the advisory 3 times when I received it. The third paragraph, the one specifying that the codes are not instructions, had not appeared in any previous communication about this event. Signal Analysis felt it necessary to state explicitly that the wind should not be obeyed. I filed the advisory and maintained monitoring. At 23:48, I received an informal communication from Operator Fesser at Dunmore 3. He asked whether I had noticed that the code transition from Priority 3 to Priority 2 represented an escalation. I told him I had noticed. He asked whether the encoding format included priorities above Priority 2. I told him it did. Priority 1 exists. It corresponds to immediate threat to network integrity. All stations execute protective shutdown and await recovery directive. Priority 1 has been issued twice in the history of the Continuity Office, both times in response to events that are classified. Fesser asked whether I thought the wind was going to reach Priority 1. I told him that was speculation and that I could not comment. He said, "I know. I just wanted someone else to have thought about it." I told him to maintain monitoring. He acknowledged and signed off. By 1 a.m. this morning, the Priority 2 pattern had propagated across all monitored sectors. Every station with an active atmospheric array, 31 stations in total, was recording the same encoded structure in ambient wind noise. Conditions varied considerably across the network. Some stations reported near-calm winds. Others reported moderate gusting. 2 stations in the Northern Highland sector reported sustained winds above 40 kilometers per hour. The pattern was present in all of them. I want to address the significance of this. Wind is not uniform. It is turbulent, chaotic, variable. Wind speed, direction, and character differ moment to moment and place to place. The idea that a single coherent amplitude pattern could be present simultaneously in wind conditions ranging from near calm to gale force across a geographic area exceeding 600,000 square kilometers is not consistent with any atmospheric model I'm aware of. Signal analysis in their 2 o'clock assessment confirmed this. I will read the relevant passage. The persistence of the encoded pattern across diverse meteorological conditions suggests the encoding is not a product of a specific atmospheric phenomenon. Not a pressure wave, not a resonance artifact, not a thermally driven oscillation. The pattern is present in the wind, irrespective of the wind's other characteristics. To state this plainly, the pattern is not being generated by the wind. The pattern is being carried by the wind in the same way that temperature or humidity is carried by the wind. It appears to be a property of the air mass itself. A property of the air mass. The report continued, signal analysis has no precedent for this classification. The closest analog in existing literature is acoustic signature propagation in structured fluid dynamics, but those models require a generating source, an oscillating boundary, a resonant cavity, or a mechanical driver. No such source has been identified. A generating source should exist. We have been unable to locate it. Western coastal monitoring stations represent our furthest detection points, and the pattern is already fully formed upon arrival at those stations. This suggests the source, if one exists, is located offshore, beyond our monitoring infrastructure. The source is beyond the network. The wind arrives already encoded. At 2:14, I received an updated operational directive. All relay stations were to begin recording atmospheric data on dedicated backup channels, preserving full waveform fidelity. Archives were to be tagged with the event file reference and transmitted to signal analysis at 6-hour intervals. I initiated the recording protocol and confirmed compliance. At 2:30, something new happened. Operator Chasen at Wendover 7 reported that his station's atmospheric array had detected a second encoded pattern, running simultaneously with the first. The priority 2 pattern continued. It had not changed, but a second pattern, lower amplitude, partially masked by the first, had appeared underneath it. Chasen isolated the secondary waveform and ran it against the encoding reference table. It did not match any Continuity Office priority code. He expanded his comparison to the full encoding library. Every standardized message format in current or historical use. The secondary pattern matched a format designated CO-ENC-1949/legacy, which had been retired from operational use in 1971. The match message was, "Field station compromised. Evacuate to secondary position." I will repeat that. The wind was simultaneously carrying 2 encoded messages. The first, in the current encoding format, all monitoring stations confirm operational readiness. Await tasking. The second, in a format that has not been in use for over 50 years. Field station compromised. Evacuate to secondary position. Chasen reported that he was uncertain how to proceed. I contacted the coordination desk. The coordination desk contacted signal analysis. Signal analysis requested 45 minutes to evaluate. At 3:22, signal analysis confirmed the secondary pattern. It was present at all western and central stations. Eastern stations had not yet detected it, consistent with the propagation delay. Signal analysis noted that the secondary pattern was structurally degraded compared to the primary. Its timing intervals were slightly less precise, its amplitude lower, and its repetition less consistent. They described it as analogous to a weaker signal transmitted on the same carrier. They also noted, and I will quote directly, "The use of the 1949 legacy encoding format raises significant questions about the nature of the generating source. That format was internal to the Continuity Office and was never publicly distributed. Its timing specifications were classified until format retirement in 1971. Even after retirement, the specifications were archived under restricted access. The likelihood of an external source replicating this format accidentally is, in signal analysis's assessment, 0. Whatever is encoding the wind knows Continuity Office communication protocols, including ones that have been restricted for over 50 years. At 3:40, I decided within my operational authority. I accessed the Caro 6 archive terminal and initiated a search for any previous event involving atmospheric encoded signals, encoded wind patterns, or ambient acoustic anomalies matching communication formats. Archive searches at relay stations are limited to the station's local holdings, and whatever portions of the central archive have been mirrored to regional hubs. Caro 6 holds approximately 40% of the central archive, which is more than most stations, but far from complete. The search returned 3 results. The first was a maintenance log from 1983. A technician at a station I did not recognize, designated Barrowfield, noting that atmospheric array calibration had been complicated by a persistent low-frequency pulse in ambient recordings that matched no known environmental source. The log contained no further analysis. The pulse was attributed to equipment aging. Barrowfield Station does not appear in any current operational listing. I do not know if it was decommissioned or redesignated. The second result was a fragment, not a full document, but an index entry for a file that is not held at Caro 6. The index entry read CO-ATM-1967-11/wind, atmospheric acoustic anomaly, encoded signal class, Western Coastal Sector. Duration, 9 days. Resolution, C file. The file itself was not available. The index entry was tagged with a restriction code I had not encountered before. Monitoring concluded, do not reopen. I have seen files tagged as classified. I have seen files tagged as restricted. I have seen files tagged as pending review. I have never seen a file tagged as do not reopen. The third result was the most detailed, and I will read it in full. It is a memo, dated April 1952, from a position designated Atmospheric Monitoring Liaison, a role that no longer exists within the Continuity Office, to my knowledge. Encoded atmospheric signal spring, 1952 occurrence. This memo documents the third recorded occurrence of structured encoding detected in ambient atmospheric acoustics within Continuity Office monitoring range. As with the previous 2 occurrences, 1949-1951, the encoding matches Continuity Office priority communication formats. The 1952 occurrence additionally contains secondary and tertiary encoded layers using formats from the 1943 Provisional Encoding System and the 1947 Interim Standard, respectively. Duration of the 1952 occurrence was 11 days. The encoding progressed through Priority 4, Priority 3, and Priority 2 before cessation. Priority 1 was not reached. Wind direction during all 3 occurrences has been consistent. Oceanic origin, westerly propagation inland. Atmospheric Monitoring Liaison recommends the following. 1. That this phenomenon be assigned a standing monitoring classification rather than being evaluated as a novel event with each recurrence. 2. That the phenomenon be designated encoded atmospheric return, pending formal naming. 3. That a dedicated monitoring protocol be established for the western coastal sector during periods of sustained westerly airflow. 4. That the question of generating source be formally investigated, including the possibility of offshore or non-terrestrial origin. 5. That the progressive nature of the encoding, the consistent escalation through priority levels with each occurrence, be evaluated for predictive implications. None of these recommendations were adopted following the 1949 or 1951 occurrences. This liaison respectfully notes that the phenomenon does not appear to be diminishing. The memo is signed, but the signature is illegible in the archived copy. I will note the date of this memo, 1952, 74 years ago. The phenomenon was already on its third occurrence, and recommendations for dedicated monitoring were already being ignored. I transmitted the archive results to Signal Analysis and the Coordination Desk at 0410. At 0435, Signal Analysis acknowledged receipt. Their response was brief. Archive findings are consistent with our emerging assessment. Historical file CO-ATM-1967-11/wind has been requested from Central Archive under priority retrieval. Expect delay. No comment was made on the restriction tag. No comment was made on the 1952 memo's unadopted recommendations. At 4:50 this morning, Relay Station Prestwick 4, the westernmost active station, reported a third encoded layer in its atmospheric recordings. The primary pattern? Priority 2. Current format. Unchanged. The secondary pattern? Field station compromised. Evacuate to secondary position. 1949 legacy format. Unchanged. The tertiary pattern? A new encoding. Faint. Detected only after extensive filtering to remove the two stronger patterns. Prestwick 4's operator Landry, ran the tertiary pattern against the full encoding library. It matched no known format, current or historical. She widened the comparison to include provisional, interim, and experimental encoding formats listed in the archive index formats that were proposed but never adopted, or adopted briefly during transitional periods. No match. Landry reported the tertiary pattern's characteristics. Burst duration, 3.7 seconds. Silence interval, 0.3 seconds. Group count, 7. Intergroup pause, 4.4 seconds. These intervals do not correspond to any encoding system the Continuity Office has ever used. Signal Analysis was notified. Their response, received at 0520, contained a sentence I have reread several times. The tertiary pattern's timing structure has been compared against all known Continuity Office encoding formats, including provisional, experimental, and pre-establishment formats, dating to the organization's founding in 1941. No match was found. However, the structure is consistent with a valid encoding. It exhibits the regularity, repeatability, and information density characteristics of a designed communication format. It is not noise. It is not a harmonic artifact of the other two patterns. It is a third message, encoded in a format we do not recognize. The wind is carrying 3 messages. 2 in formats the Continuity Office has used. 1 in a format no one can identify. At 0540, Operator Landry at Prestwick 4 sent an additional observation. I will read it directly. I have been monitoring the tertiary pattern since initial detection. I want to note something that may not be evident from waveform data alone. The primary pattern, Priority 2, is steady. It repeats at consistent amplitude, consistent timing. The secondary pattern, the 1949 legacy code, is degraded, as previously reported. It is weaker, less precise, less consistent. It behaves, to use an imperfect analogy, as an older recording played back on aging equipment. The tertiary pattern does not behave like either of these. Its amplitude is increasing. Slowly, perhaps 2% per hour, but consistently, it is getting stronger. If this rate continues, the tertiary pattern will exceed the amplitude of the primary pattern within approximately 30 hours. I confirmed receipt of Landry's observation and forwarded it to signal analysis. I also, on my own initiative, forwarded it to every relay station on the network. I was not directed to do this. It was not part of any protocol. I made a judgment that all operators should be aware. At 600, the overnight coordination desk was scheduled to transfer authority to the day coordination desk. This is a routine handoff that occurs every 12 hours. The overnight desk transmits a status summary. The day desk acknowledges, and operational authority transitions. At 600, no handoff communication was received. At 0605, I attempted to contact the coordination desk directly. No response. At 0610, Operator Fesser at Dunmore 3 contacted me to ask whether I had received the handoff. He had not. At 0615, Operator Chasen at Wendover 7 contacted me with the same question. By 6:20, I had received inquiries from 9 stations. None had received the coordination desk handoff. None could reach the coordination desk. I initiated the standard communication recovery protocol. 3 contact attempts at 5-minute intervals on primary and backup channels, followed by escalation to the regional coordination backup at Hardcastle Ridge. Primary channel, no response. 3 attempts. Backup channel, no response. 3 attempts. Hardcastle Ridge regional backup, no response. At 0645, I contacted Signal Analysis directly. Signal Analysis is not an operational authority. They are an analytical division, but they were the last continuity office entity I had successfully communicated with. Signal Analysis responded at 0652. Their response: "We are aware of the coordination desk communication loss. We are also unable to reach Hardcastle Ridge. We are attempting to establish alternative contact. Signal Analysis does not possess operational authority and cannot issue directives. Stations should maintain current monitoring protocols until authority is restored." Until authority is restored. I acknowledged and informed all stations on the network of Signal Analysis's response. At 0710, Operator Landry at Prestwick 4 asked whether anyone had considered the possibility that the coordination desk's communication loss was related to the atmospheric encoding event. I told her that Signal Analysis had not indicated any such connection. She said, "The coordination desk went silent at the exact time the day shift was supposed to begin. The day shift would have been the first fresh operational authority to evaluate this event. Does that seem like a coincidence to you?" I told her I was not in a position to assess correlation. She said, "I know. I am logging this observation in my station record." I told her to do so. I also logged it in mine. At 7:30, Relay Station Fieldgate 1, a small station in the mid-northern sector, staffed by a single operator, transmitted an urgent report. The operator was Jaya Morrow. I have worked with Morrow on coordination exercises. She is precise. She does not file urgent reports casually. Her report stated the following. At approximately 0715, while conducting routine exterior inspection of the Fieldgate 1 atmospheric array, I stepped outside the station building into sustained westerly wind, approximately 20 kilometers per hour. I heard the encoding. I want to be very clear. Previous field verification at Wendover 7 confirmed the pattern is inaudible to the unaided human ear. Only electronic detection and waveform analysis could identify the encoding. At 0715, standing in the wind at Fieldgate 1, I could hear it. Not as wind, not as a sound within the wind, as a voice. I do not mean a human voice. I do not mean speech. I mean the encoding. The priority 2 pattern was audible as a tonal sequence, rhythmic, distinct, repeating. I stood in the wind for 4 minutes. During that time, I heard the primary pattern clearly. I also heard what I believe was the secondary pattern, the legacy code, as a lower, less distinct tonal sequence underneath. I did not hear the tertiary pattern. I returned inside and immediately checked my station's electronic readings. The waveform data matches what I heard. The encoding has not changed, but its amplitude has increased significantly since my last calibration check at 0400. The wind is getting louder, not the wind speed, the encoding. I received Morrow's report and forwarded it to all stations and to signal analysis. Within 20 minutes, 3 other operators reported similar experiences. Operator Chasen at Wendover 7 went outside at 0740 after reading Morrow's report. She is correct. The encoding is audible. It sounds, and I am choosing this word carefully, intentional. Operator Trevis at Halverston 2 confirmed, audible. I described the sound to my maintenance technician before showing her the waveform data. She identified the correct pattern timing from my verbal description alone. Operator Landry at Prestwick 4. It has been audible here since approximately 0630. I did not report it because I assumed it was an artifact of my extended monitoring, that I had become sensitized to the pattern and was perceiving it in ordinary wind noise. Morrow's report changes my assessment. I should have reported earlier. I want to note something about Landry's statement. She assumed she was imagining it. She second-guessed her own perception because the previous assessment said the encoding was inaudible. This is a trained operator, 11 years of experience, and the encoding crossed the threshold from electronic only to human audible, so gradually that the first person to hear it questioned her own competence rather than report it. I went outside at 0805. The wind at Caro 6 was light, perhaps 10 kilometers per hour, a mild westerly, nothing notable. I stood on the access platform outside the main door. I could hear it. It is difficult to describe accurately. The wind still sounds like wind. The movement of air, the interaction with surfaces, the low, broad noise of atmosphere in motion, all of that is present and normal. But within it, repeating and rhythmic, there is a tonal structure, a rising and falling, a pulse. It is not loud, it is not sharp, but once you hear it, you cannot stop hearing it. I listened for 6 minutes. I confirmed the primary pattern, the priority 2 timing, by counting intervals against my watch. The match was exact. I returned inside and confirmed my atmospheric array readings were consistent. Before closing the exterior door, I stood in the doorway for a moment. The wind felt normal against my face. It sounded like it was trying to tell me something. I closed the door. At 0900, Signal Analysis, still the only continuity office entity maintaining communication, transmitted an unscheduled bulletin. I will read it completely. Bulletin CO-A, TM-2026-07-29/E, NC Priority Update. 1. The Coordination Desk remains unreachable. Hardcastle Ridge Regional Backup remains unreachable. Signal Analysis is operating under Emergency Analytical Authority, which does not include operational directive capability. Relay stations are to maintain current protocols. 2. The atmospheric encoded signal continues to escalate. The primary pattern, priority 2, current format, remains stable. The secondary pattern, legacy 1949 format, remains stable. The tertiary pattern, unidentified format, continues to increase in amplitude. Current projections indicate the tertiary pattern will become the dominant signal within 18 to 22 hours. 3. Central Archive has delivered file CO-ATM-1967-11/wind in response to priority retrieval request. The file was accompanied by a restriction tag reading, "Monitoring concluded. Do not reopen." Signal Analysis has opened the file under Emergency Analytical Authority. 4. File CO-ATM-1967-11/wind documents a 9-day atmospheric encoding event occurring in November 1967. The event exhibited identical characteristics to the current occurrence: structured encoding and ambient wind noise, westerly oceanic propagation, progressive priority escalation, and the presence of multiple simultaneous encoded layers. 5. The 1967 event reached Priority 2 on Day 4 and remained at Priority 2 for the duration. Priority 1 was not reached. 3 encoded layers were detected. The primary and secondary layers matched Continuity Office formats. The tertiary layer matched no known format. 6. On Day 7 of the 1967 event, a field team was dispatched to the western coast to attempt source identification. The team established an observation post at Greymount Point, the westernmost accessible landfall in the monitoring network. 7. The field team reported the following: encoding is maximally audible at coastal exposure. At Greymount Point, standing in direct oceanic wind, the encoded signal is the dominant audible characteristic of the wind. The wind does not sound like wind. The wind sounds like a transmission. 8. On Day 8, the field team attempted directional acoustic analysis using portable equipment. Their conclusion: the encoding is not emanating from a point source. It is present uniformly across the entire incoming air mass. The signal is omnidirectional within the wind. There is no source. The wind itself is the source. 9. On Day 9, the encoding ceased. All 3 layers terminated simultaneously. Wind returned to normal acoustic characteristics within approximately 2 hours. 10. File CO-ATM-1967-11/wind concludes with a handwritten annotation, not attributed to any named analyst. The annotation reads, "Third occurrence since 1962. Format adoption. 5th occurrence since 1949. Estimated 7th overall. Tertiary pattern consistent across all documented occurrences. Recommend permanent coastal monitoring. Recommend decoding effort for tertiary pattern. Recommend these recommendations not be ignored for a 4th time." 11. Appended to the file, and this is the reason for this priority bulletin, is a single additional page, dated 1974. It is a decoding worksheet. Someone, at some point after the file was restricted, continued working on the tertiary pattern. 12. The worksheet contains a partial decode. The methodology is not fully documented, but appears to derive from comparative analysis of the tertiary pattern's timing intervals against an older encoding standard, pre-Continuity Office, possibly military, possibly dating to the 1930s. 13. The partial decode of the tertiary pattern reads as follows. 3 words, repeating. Station. Confirm. Ready. 14. Signal Analysis is unable to verify this decode independently, as the encoding standard referenced in the worksheet is not held in our archive. We present it without endorsement, but note that the methodology appears systematic, and the analyst, whoever they were, appears to have had access to encoding references that predate the Continuity Office. End of bulletin. I have been sitting at my desk for several minutes. Station. Confirm. Ready. The wind has been saying station. Confirm. Ready. Since at least 1949, possibly longer, and no one answered. And it has not stopped asking. At 0940, Operator Fesser at Dunmore, 3 initiated an open channel communication, a broadcast to all stations simultaneously. This is technically a protocol violation. Open channel is reserved for coordination desk use, but the coordination desk is not here. Fesser's broadcast. This is Dunmore 3. I've read the signal analysis bulletin. All of you have read it. I want to ask the question I think all of us are asking. The wind is carrying a message that says, "Station, confirm, ready." It has been carrying this message for at least 77 years. It is encoded in a format that predates our institution. It is asking for a response. What happens if we respond? No one answered for approximately 1 minute. Then Operator Landry at Prestwick 4. That is not our decision to make. We do not have operational authority. Fesser, there is no operational authority. The coordination desk is gone. Harcastle Ridge is gone. We are the network. Operator Morrow at Fieldgate 1. Landry is right. We don't have authority. But Fesser is also right. There is no one else. If signal analysis can't issue directives, and we can't reach anyone above us, then who decides? Operator Trevis at Halverston 2. Has anyone asked signal analysis directly whether we should respond? I intervened at this point. I transmitted. This is Caro 6. I will contact signal analysis with the question. All stations stand by. Maintain monitoring. Do not transmit on any encoded frequency until guidance is received. At 0955, I contacted signal analysis. I asked, given the partial decode of the tertiary pattern, has signal analysis evaluated the implications of a response transmission using the apparent encoding format? Signal analysis responded at 1012. Signal analysis has considered this question. Our assessment is as follows. A response would require transmission in the unidentified encoding format, the format of the tertiary pattern. We do not possess the full specifications of this format. The partial decode suggests a pre-continuity office military encoding standard, but we do not have access to that standard and cannot reconstruct it from the available worksheet. Even if reconstruction were possible, the question of whether to respond is an operational decision with potentially irreversible consequences. Signal analysis does not have the authority to authorize or recommend such an action. However, signal analysis notes the following. The atmospheric encoding event follows a historical pattern of escalation. Each recorded occurrence has progressed further through the priority sequence than the last. The 1949 occurrence reached priority 4. The 1951 occurrence reached priority 3. The 1952 occurrence reached priority 2. The 1967 occurrence reached priority 2 and held. The current occurrence reached priority 2 within approximately 8 hours. This is significantly faster than any previous occurrence. If the pattern of escalation continues, this occurrence will reach priority 1. Priority 1, in the current encoding format, means immediate threat to network integrity. All stations execute protective shutdown. Signal analysis cannot predict what reaching priority 1 would mean in the context of an atmospheric encoded signal that originates from outside the network. We do not know if priority 1 is a message or a consequence. We also note that the tertiary pattern, station, confirm, ready, has been increasing in amplitude throughout this event and will become the dominant signal within hours. If the tertiary pattern is a request, its dominance over the continuity office format patterns could be interpreted as a shift in communicative priority. The request is becoming more important than the instructions. I relayed this response to all stations. The open channel remained silent for a long time after that. At 10:45, I returned to the archive. I was not searching for anything specific. I was looking for the person who wrote the decoding worksheet, the one appended to the 1967 file, dated 1974. The archive at Caro 6 does not contain personnel records, but it does contain transmission logs, and transmission logs sometimes contain operator names. I searched for all transmissions tagged with atmospheric monitoring keywords between 1970 and 1978. I found a series of 12 transmissions, spaced irregularly over a period from 1971 to 1974, all originating from a station designated Greymount Coastal. All were authored by someone identified only as Listener 6. The transmissions are brief. They're all addressed to the same recipient: Atmospheric Monitoring Liaison, Continuity Office Central, a position that, as I noted earlier, no longer exists. I will read selected entries. March 1971. Greymount Coastal to AML Central. Spring westerlies have begun. Arrays active. No encoding detected at this time. Standing by. Listener 6. November 1971. Greymount Coastal to AML Central. Encoded atmospheric signal detected at 1400 on November 3rd. 3 layers present. Primary match is current. Priority 3 format. Secondary match is 1949 legacy. Tertiary match is unidentified pre-establishment format, consistent with previous occurrences. Duration to date, 2 days. Escalation rate is slower than 1967. We'll continue monitoring. Listener 6. December 1971. Greymount Coastal to AML Central. November occurrence terminated on day 6. Maximum escalation. Priority 3. No change in tertiary pattern decode. Station. Confirm. Ready. Request noted and logged for the 8th time. Listener 6. April 1973. Greymount Coastal to AML Central. I note that my previous 4 reports have not been acknowledged. I note that the AML position was formally dissolved in 1970. I note that I am transmitting to a recipient that no longer exists. I am continuing to transmit because the wind continues to ask. If the wind can transmit to a network that will not answer, I can transmit to an office that will not answer. There is a symmetry to this that I am not comfortable examining too closely. Listener 6. January 1974. Greymount Coastal to AML Central. I have completed a partial decode of the tertiary pattern. Working decode, station, confirm, ready. Methodology and worksheet attached under separate cover. I believe the encoding format predates the continuity office by at least 15 years. The format is consistent with coastal signal stations operated during the 1930s military installations, tasked with monitoring offshore approaches. These stations used proprietary encoding systems that were not inherited by the continuity office upon its establishment. The implication, which I state for the record, is that the wind learned to speak in codes used by the people who first listened to it, and it has been speaking in those codes ever since, adding new codes as new listeners appeared, attempting to be understood. It has been learning our languages. It has been trying for 90 years. Listener 6. September 1974. This is the final entry. Greymount Coastal to AML Central. I have decided to respond. I do not have authorization. There is no one to authorize it. The AML position is dissolved. My station is unlisted. My reports go unanswered. The wind is the only thing that still speaks to me with any consistency. I have reconstructed the tertiary encoding format sufficiently to generate a basic response. Tomorrow morning, at 600 hours, I will direct a high-amplitude acoustic transmission into the prevailing westerly wind using the Greymount Coastal signal horn. The transmission will use the tertiary format. The message will be, station confirms. Ready. I do not know what will happen. I do not expect this report to be read. I am filing it because procedure requires it. And I find I still respect procedure even when procedure has long since ceased to respect me. This is Listener 6. Signing off. Greymount Coastal. There are no further transmissions from Greymount Coastal. There is no record of a station by that name in the current operational listing. There is no record of anyone designated Listener 6 in any index available to me. There is no record of any response. At 11:30 this morning, every atmospheric array on the relay network recorded a simultaneous amplitude spike in the tertiary pattern. Not a gradual increase, a spike, a single event. The tertiary pattern station, confirm, ready, which had been increasing by approximately 2% per hour, jumped in amplitude by approximately 340% in under 4 seconds. The primary pattern, priority 2, current format, did not change. The secondary pattern, the legacy code, did not change, only the tertiary. After the spike, the tertiary pattern did not return to its previous level. It remained at the elevated amplitude. Operator Landry's projection that the tertiary would become the dominant signal within 18 to 22 hours was instantly obsolete. The tertiary was now the dominant signal. At every station on the network, the wind now sounded, predominantly, like one message: station, confirm, ready. At 11:35, Operator Morrow at Fieldgate 1 reported that the tertiary pattern was now clearly audible inside her station, with all doors and windows closed. At 11:38, I confirmed the same at Caro 6. I could hear it at my desk, a rhythmic tonal pulsing, muffled by the building's insulation but unmistakable. 7 grouped tones. Pause. 7 grouped tones. Pause. Station. Confirm. Ready. I can hear it now as I make this broadcast. It is patient. It is steady. It does not waver. At 11:42, Signal Analysis transmitted what I believe may be their final communication for some time. I will read it. All stations. Signal Analysis. Emergency Analytical Assessment. The amplitude spike in the tertiary pattern at 11:30 does not match any previous recorded event behavior. No historical occurrence includes a sudden amplitude increase of this magnitude. However, Signal Analysis has reviewed the Listener 6 transmissions forwarded by Caro 6. We note the final transmission, dated September 1974, in which Listener 6 states an intention to respond to the tertiary pattern using a reconstructed encoding format. We note that the 1967 file CO-ATM-1967-11/wind was restricted with the tag "Monitoring concluded. Do not reopen." The restriction was applied in late 1974. We note that no further atmospheric encoding events were documented between 1974 and the current occurrence, a gap of 52 years. Previous intervals between occurrences ranged from 2 to 4 years. Signal Analysis offers the following interpretation, presented as hypothesis only. Listener 6 responded. The wind received the response. Monitoring was concluded because the event was considered resolved. The file was restricted to prevent further interaction. The current occurrence 52 years later may represent a resumption. If the wind received a confirmation in 1974 and has now returned, the tertiary message may no longer be a request. Station, confirm. Ready may no longer be a question. It may be an acknowledgement. Signal Analysis is relocating to a shielded facility to continue operations. Communication may be intermittent. All stations maintain monitoring. Do not transmit encoded responses. Do not engage with the signal. This is the last scheduled bulletin until conditions change. At 12:15 this afternoon, Relay Station Prestwick 4 reported that the primary pattern, the priority 2 code in current format, had begun transitioning. The timing intervals were shifting, burst duration shortening, silence intervals narrowing, group count changing. Landry at Prestwick 4 ran continuous comparison against the encoding reference table, and reported the transition in real time over open channel. Priority 2 intervals degrading. Burst duration now 0.9 seconds. Silence interval 0.4 seconds. Group count. This is not transitioning to priority 1. The intervals are not converging on priority 1. A pause. The intervals are converging on the tertiary format. Another pause. The primary pattern is changing to match the tertiary pattern. The continuity office code is being replaced. Over the following 90 minutes, every station on the network confirmed the same transition. The primary pattern, the message in our encoding format, was slowly, steadily shifting its timing intervals until it matched the tertiary pattern. By 1350, the primary pattern was indistinguishable from the tertiary. The secondary pattern, the 1949 legacy code, began its own transition at 1320. Same direction, same destination. By 1430, all 3 layers had converged. The wind now carries one message in one format. Station. Confirm. Ready. 3 layers deep, 3 intensities, all saying the same thing, in a language that is not ours, in a language that predates us, in a language that someone answered 52 years ago, and that has come back to say, "We heard you." It is now 2000. I have been broadcasting for some time. I have been sitting at this desk since before dawn. I will provide a status update. The coordination desk has not been recovered. Harcastle Ridge has not responded. Signal analysis has not communicated since their relocation notice. I do not know whether they are operational. All relay stations remain active. All operators remain at their posts. I have been in communication with 31 stations over the course of this event. Not one operator has abandoned their position. The wind continues. The encoding continues. Station. Confirm. Ready. It is audible throughout the interior of every station on the network. It is audible at my desk. It is the sound I have been hearing since this morning. A slow, patient, tonal rhythm inside the wind, like breathing, like counting, like something waiting for a response that was already given half a century ago. At 1600, Operator Morrow at Fieldgate 1 reported that the encoding was audible inside her vehicle with the engine running and all windows closed. At 1730, Operator Fesser at Dunmore 3 reported that he could hear the encoding in the sound of water running from his station's tap. At 1815, Operator Chasen at Wendover 7 reported that he could hear it in the hum of his station's electrical systems. These reports are consistent with increasing amplitude saturation. The encoded pattern is not spreading to new media. It is becoming loud enough that its acoustic presence is resonating through solid structures, water systems, and electrical infrastructure by pure mechanical transfer. The wind is getting louder, not the wind, the message. At 1900, I stepped outside for the second time today. The wind was moderate, perhaps 18 kilometers per hour. The sun was low. The air was warm. I stood on the access platform, and I listened. I could hear it immediately, not as a subtle patterning within the wind, not as a tonal structure requiring attention to detect. It was the primary characteristic of the wind. The air moving past me was speaking. That is the only honest description. 7 grouped pulses. Pause. 7 grouped pulses. Pause. It was not threatening. I want to state that clearly. Standing in it, listening to it, there was no menace, no sense of danger, no instinct to flee. The message was patient. It was steady. It had the quality of something that has been repeating itself for a very long time and is accustomed to waiting. 52 years ago, someone standing on a coastal cliff answered it, and now it has returned, and it is confirming receipt. Station. Confirm. Ready. I went back inside. At 19:30, Operator Fesser initiated one final open-channel broadcast. He said, "This is Dunmore 3. I want to return to my earlier question. What happens if we respond?" Operator Landry, "Signal analysis said not to." Fesser, "Signal analysis is gone. The coordination desk is gone. Harcastle Ridge is gone. We are the continuity office right now. 31 operators and 31 stations. And the wind is asking." Operator Trevis, "It's not asking. Signal analysis said it might be acknowledging. There's a difference." Fesser, "Is there? Station, confirm, ready." If that's an acknowledgement, what's it acknowledging? Listener 6 said station confirms, ready. She said she was ready. The wind comes back 52 years later and says, "Station, confirm, ready." Louder, to all of us, in all 3 layers. That sounds like a question to me. It sounds like it's asking if the whole network is ready. Operator Morrow, "Ready for what?" Silence. Fesser, "I don't know, but I think it's been trying to tell us for 90 years, and we keep treating it as an anomaly instead of a communication." More silence. Then Operator Landry, "Quietly, I have spent the last 2 hours listening to the wind vibrate through the walls of my station. It is the loneliest sound I have ever heard. And I do not mean that it makes me feel lonely. I mean the sound itself is lonely. Whatever is sending this has been transmitting into silence for nearly a century. One person answered it once, and it waited 52 years and came back to ask if anyone else was listening." A long pause. "I am not going to respond. I do not have the authority or the equipment or the encoding specifications. But I want to say, and I want it on the record, that if this is a communication, then our institution has failed at the most basic function of a communications network. Something has been trying to talk to us. And we filed it, classified it, restricted it, and forgot." I did not comment on the open channel. I am commenting now. Landry is correct. It is now 2100. I am making this broadcast because the procedure requires a nightly relay transmission, and I am the operator on duty at the regional hub. The wind is audible inside my station. It is audible through the walls, through the floor, through the ceiling. The message is continuous. All 31 stations are reporting. No operators have left. No stations have gone silent. The network is intact. The network is intact, while the entire authority structure above it has disappeared. I find that the operators are the part of the system that remains. I received one additional piece of information at 2040 that I want to include in this broadcast. Signal analysis. I had assumed they were unreachable, transmitted a brief, low-priority message on what appears to be a maintenance channel. The message contained no analysis and no directive. It contained a single archive fragment, pulled from the central archive, with no commentary. The fragment is from a document dated 1938, 3 years before the Continuity Office was established. It appears to be a logbook entry from a coastal signal station operated by a branch of the military that I cannot identify from the available text. The entry reads, October 18th, 1938. Wind from the west, steady, 22 knots. Signal Corporal Avery reports encoded pattern in wind noise during morning watch. Pattern identified as station call format. Repeating. No station in this network uses that call pattern. Corporal Avery notes the call has been present on 3 of the last 5 mornings, always during westerly wind. He has begun calling it the patient one. Corporal Avery has proposed responding using the standard acknowledgement format. The commanding officer denied the request. Reason given, we do not know who is calling, and you do not answer a call until you know who is on the other end. Corporal Avery's note appended to denial. Respectfully, sir. Whoever it is, they've been calling longer than we've been listening. 1938. The wind was speaking in 1938, in a format used by coastal signal stations, which means it was speaking before that, in whatever format came before. And before that, and before that, we are not the first listeners. We are not the first network. We are not the first institution to detect this and decide not to answer. And every time a new institution builds a new communication system, the wind learns the new codes and adds them to the message. It learned military signal formats in the 1930s. It learned the Continuity Office's 1949 provisional codes. It learned the 1962 format, the current format. It has been learning our languages one after another, adding each one to the signal, trying every way it knows to be understood. And its oldest message, the first layer, the one that predates all of us, has always said the same thing. Station. Confirm. Ready. Is anyone there? Can you hear me? I am waiting. It is 21:47. I am going to conclude this broadcast. The wind continues. The message continues. The network continues. I do not have operational authority to make decisions about this event. I do not have the encoding specifications to formulate a response. I do not have contact with anyone who does. What I have is a transmitter, a microphone, and a relay frequency. And I have 31 operators who have not left their stations. I want to note for the record that at 21:30, I began receiving brief transmissions from individual stations, not reports, not operational communications, personal messages, logged under station identifiers, directed to no specific recipient. Operator Morrow at Fieldgate 1, listening. Operator Chasen at Wendover 7, still here. Operator Trevis at Halverston 2, monitoring continues. Operator Fesser at Dunmore 3, standing by. One by one, station after station, 31 operators, each transmitting a single word or phrase into the network. Not encoded, not formatted, not in any protocol. Just answering. I do not know if the wind can hear our transmissions. I do not know if radio frequency broadcasts interact with whatever mechanism carries the encoded signal. I do not know if speaking into a microphone in a closed building has any relevance to an atmospheric acoustic phenomenon. But the network is responding. Not with authority. Not with encoded formats. Not with reconstructed military signal protocols. With presence. We are here. We hear you. I am adding my own transmission to the record. This is Operator Marin Elish, Caro 6, Regional Hub, Eastern Sector, listening. The wind is in the walls of this station. It is in the floor and the ceiling and the glass. It is patient, and it is steady, and it has been speaking for longer than any of us have been alive. I do not know what ready means. But if you are asking whether anyone is here, the answer has always been yes. We were just very slow to say it. This has been the Residual Relay, Long-Range Signal Network, Frequency-Locked Broadcast. The time is 2200. Nightly relay transmission concludes. Monitoring continues.